Hi everyone, welcome back to this channel of crafting, crochet and knitting. My name is Nikki and welcome to my little yarniverse. So hello, welcome if you're new, welcome back if you're a returning viewer. As always, it is great to have you here with me today. So my head is buzzing with all the things I would like to sit down and record or edit, and none of them are actually making it into a vlog format. So I have got our trip to Scotland that we had somewhat recently. It was beautiful. It was relaxing. I got so much knitting done. We saw so much incredible nature in the Highlands. I recorded loads of footage. And yeah, I have not had time to sit and edit hours, literally hours of footage. So that's not happening at the moment. And I figured that rather than waiting you guys just wait until I finally did that video, I would put out something on the hand-dyed skeins that I've used so far. And this is partly because one of those skeins was, well, kind of two of those skeins, same dyer, was something that I was making whilst I was in Scotland. And I made something just before that as well, and I used something that I made with hand-dyed yarn in Scotland, and there was all this beautiful hand-dyed yarn loveliness, which I have spent the last year or so buying hand-dyed yarn, but sitting it on my shelf and just kind of letting it settle, letting myself think what I could make with it that merits using such luxurious yarn. And so I finally started doing something and I thought, yeah, okay, I can't wait to share that with you. Except that the other thing in my head at the moment is just how much yarn I have. And this is an ongoing thing. I've mentioned it before on this channel that I have got a shelving unit that is bursting at the seams with yarn, and it's getting in my head a lot and I need to declutter a bit. So I've been trying to make some bigger jumpers out of some of that yarn. So all of these things are happening in my head. And the thing that is on my mind at the moment most, because of last night, is a jumper. So last night I had to frog back 5 days of work at roughly 2 hours a day. So I had to rip back 10 hours of work. And this was quite soul crushing, to be honest, but it was the right thing to do, and I'm really holding on to that. And I thought, because that's on my mind right now, the learning process of making this jumper, I thought today's video has to be on that. I need a bit of a vent about that process, and also I can't be the only one who's having the same struggles as I've been having with making a yoke down jumper to fit me. So I thought I would try and share some hints and tips that I've been learning along the way. So let's get into it. Okay, so for context, let me show you what it is that I am aiming for. I am aiming for the Moon Phases jumper. Now this is a free pattern online. I will try and find the link that I saved it from and put it in the description because I printed this off a little while ago, and so I'm not actually sure whether I saved it, so I'll try and find that link for you and put it down below in the description box. And obviously I'm aiming for this because I am really into astronomy and it's just the perfect colour work sweater to attempt. And it's even more perfect because one of the colours that I have absolutely loads of yarn in is navy. Sorry, had to break for a sneeze there, abrupt pause. Sorry, yeah, so I was saying that I had lots of navy yarn. And this is because I made the solar system blanket a little while ago now, and I bought a full pack of navy, or I picked up a full pack of navy in the shop, and then I thought, there's no way that I can do this with just 4 balls of yarn, so I'll get a second pack. And I think I had done the maths to work out how many balls of yarn I needed, and 4 must have been in my head, but I was like, there's no way I can I can leave this just in case, because if I tip into that fifth ball of yarn, then I'm going to be kicking myself because I work for the same batch number. And this was Aldi yarn, so if you'll have shopped at Aldi before in the UK, you'll note that they don't bring out yarn consistently and they don't bring it out in the same colours. So whilst I was there, I picked up that second packet, and I just stood there kind of looking at it for a moment thinking, I know the size of blanket that I'm aiming for, and when I've made that size blanket before, I've needed 12 balls of yarn, and so I just had this panic that even 8 wouldn't be enough, even though I did my maths. And I picked up another pack of yarn. So this was at the time that Aldi was supplying yarn, DK yarn, in packs of 4 for like £3.99 or £4.99, which is really cheap because that's £1 a ball. So, and each ball is 100 grams. So I picked up 12 balls of yarn in this navy colour, and lo and behold, I ended up only using 4, maybe the 5th ball of yarn, and I've now got 2 packs of navy yarn left over in my various cubbies that are on my shelf in my normal craft room, and it's been sat there for ages and I've just not done anything with it. And so there I am thinking, okay, well, I'm probably going to make another space blanket, right? So I'm going to need that yarn again, but I haven't made another space blanket, and I found the Moon and Stars, the Moon Phases jumper instead. So okay, I've got plenty of yarn for that, even though it's a colourwork project. I shouldn't run out of yarn, because it said that all I needed was, I think it was about 50 grams of the colour that you use for the moons, and then however many balls of yarn for the jumper itself, and of course that depends on your size, and I'm a bit on the bigger size, so I always try to allow for 500 grams of yarn. I've not needed 500 grams of yarn. The last jumper I made, I used 200 in one colour and 200 in another colour, so I only actually used 400 total, and didn't even finish the balls of yarn. So I'm thinking like, okay, well, I've absolutely got plenty of yarn, so I pull it off the shelf and get started. But as I mentioned, I'm on the bigger side, and this causes a lot of challenges. So if you have ever seen a yoke down pattern before, it starts at your neck, and you go outwards in a bit of a circle, and then you fold it over, and then you fold it pretty much in half, and then you make allowances for where your arm's going to go, and then where the torso is going to be connected, and it becomes this sort of circular, like 3 ellipses in a row. So your arm, and your torso in the middle. And I've tried that before, and it has been the worst fitting thing I've ever worn. And I couldn't work out why. So challenge number 1 is that I had way too much fabric on the back of my body and way too few stitches on my arms. So there's 2 different things happening here, all to do with how people size up patterns. So and how you're supposed to pick patterns. So everyone will tell you to pick a pattern based on your full bust measurement, and sizes tend to be scaled with the full bust measurement. So the problem with that is that actually you get to a certain size in your full bust and your body does not scale in the same way anymore, and that's also still using averages anyway. There's always some fitting in there, but you could probably get away with following the pattern if you are more petite a frame, and if you are more fuller a frame, then you will get to a point in the sizing chart where you look like you have taken a blanket and thrown it over yourself and cut some holes in it. At least in my opinion, that's what I felt I looked like. I just didn't like it at all. And so I had to look for people who were of bigger sizes and see what they were doing, and they started to talk about how instead they would pick a size based on their upper bust, which is right up in your armpits, because, and I wasn't really sure why, but someone did explain it on the last video I watched, and this is because that measurement is more indicative of your skeletal frame, and so you would follow the pattern up until that point for your upper bust, not for your full bust measurement. And then when you get to your full bust, or you get to that point where you're starting to fold over and get to about here, that's when you need to start considering that you're going to need to add stitches to the front of your garment and not to the back or not to the sleeves. So I followed this, and some people also talk about short rows to give it extra length in the front to go round your bust. I so far have found that I haven't needed that, but I have needed to look at my colourwork pattern and work out where on earth I fit extra stitches without being so obvious about the pattern being different on the front than it is on the back, and also work out how many stitches I need to add when. So I had a go at this, and it's going quite well. So let me hold up what I've got so far. So I've done the whole colour work. I had done more than this. That's a different problem that I'll get into in a bit. I haven't got to the part where I frogged back yet. So I had actually worked down way past here, and before I realised my mistake. But the actual colour work went fine. So I basically have you have triangle patterns. So you would have started with a couple of stitches here, and it goes down that way, and the pattern will tell you to increase at certain points, and then you'll repeat that. But I've added extra slim wedges between these motifs, so I've got 6 extra wedges that I've added, and I did actually add like a star or 2 in there as well, just so that it was a little bit more subtle and it wasn't just a wedge of blue. So it's not noticeable at all. I don't think you could tell me where my extra wedges are. So I added extra wedges on the front, and this worked out quite nicely. I had to do the maths and work out, okay, based on my gauge, how many inches do I want to add to the front that I don't need in the back. And I did that because I did this part first and then put in a safety line so I could work out my gauge from here. Just to get a rough idea. Like, I wasn't going for a perfect fit. I just worked out to the rough inch what I would need, and it turns out that what I needed to do is to add 30 stitches in the front that I didn't add in the back, and so that worked out 6 wedges of 5. And so I took the whole triangular chart, which had, how many rows did it have? It had 49 rows in it. 49 rows, is that? No, that's the wrong size, sorry. It had 51 rows in it. About 50 rows. And so given that I wanted 5 extra stitches by the end, so by the time I got down to my bust I needed 5 extra stitches in each wedge, I decided that a nice even way of doing this, and a way that would be really subtle and unnoticeable, would be if I added a stitch every 10 rows on top of the stitches that were increasing already in the triangular pattern. So that is adjustment number 1. Now adjustment number 2 is the one that threw me. So adjustment number 2 was arms. I don't know if this is just a problem with the way that things are graded, or whether this is a me problem, because I used to do a lot of lifting when I was in secondary school all the way through university before I got ill, and so I've possibly developed more upper arm muscle than I realised. And then I got ill and I couldn't do that lifting anymore, and that has turned into a little bit more of a fatty deposit that I have on my body, and it is a shape I have to account for. So when I go shopping for clothes in a supermarket or clothes shops, I have to size up to fit my arms, to accommodate my arms, because it seems like standard grading thinks that somebody of my size, even if I take my full bust measurement, that somebody of my size only has like a 15-inch arm circumference in the upper arms. Please tell me in the comments if this is just me or this is ridiculous grading, because it angers me so much that I have to go up a dress size or 2 just to have armholes that accommodate my arms. And I don't feel like I look out of proportion. But there it is. So the pattern for the size that I did for the skeletal frame, so for my upper bust measurement, was telling me that I needed a 13-inch armhole. 13-inch! I've got like 18-inch arms. That was ridiculous. And I do not want 5 inches of negative ease in my arms. I want to be comfortable in my jumpers, and I'm probably wearing a t-shirt underneath it, so there's just no way that I'm having that much negative ease in a jumper. So cue my accommodations number 2. I actually looked at my gauge again by the time that I got down to the colour work, what I was working with, and I calculated that if I divided for the sleeves and the torso in the way that the pattern was telling me to divide for the sleeves and the torso, and then accommodated for the extra 30 stitches on the front, that I would have way more stitches around my torso and like no stitches left at all around my arms. So I did some maths and worked out that instead of splitting for the majority to be on the torso, I actually didn't need any extra stitches. I just needed to redistribute them. So I needed to have 3 whole motifs for the arms. So this would cover the crescent on both sides of the body, and then the motif here, which is like the blank motif, so no moon. And that the motifs for the full moon and for the 2 half moons were sufficient, on both sides, front and back, were sufficient for my torso, which meant that I ended up adding about 5 inches, maybe 6 inches to each arm to accommodate my arm size, and taking that from the body where I actually didn't need it. So that's worked out quite nicely. In and of itself, the maths worked. The lessons are with symmetry in a colourwork pattern. I thought I was doing really well because instead of trying to add stitches, so I added stitches only on one side of the motif, which would have been off balance if I only added it to, for example, the full moon, the half moons and the crescents. But I knew that that would be unbalanced and not symmetrical, and that so I technically also had to add it to one of the empty motifs as well, so that instead where I did wedges would ultimately sit either side of the full moon, either side of the half moons, and either side of the crescents. So I was thinking like this at the start of this project. When I did the colour work, I was thinking like this, and then I went and divided either side of the full moons, looking at where my beginning of motif markers were. So I've got these little round markers at the beginning of each motif. Now, of course, the beginning of each motif is not where I wanted to divide, because as I added wedges onto one side of the motif, I shifted the beginning of motif so that they were off center. So I actually, like my 2 markers either side of my full moon, I've got 5 extra stitches on one side that don't exist on the other side. And so my moon within the motif now, within those markers, is off center, because I have 14 stitches either side of the motif for the original motif pattern, plus 5 on one side for where I added stitches. And I went round attaching the underarms at those little motif markers, and not where I was meant to, which is shifted along by however many stitches I needed to shift. And so I didn't notice this, and it got worse, because at first I'm trying it on and I'm thinking, oh, okay, well I've actually got a lot more room in the arms than I thought I had, and the bust is a bit tight, but it fits. It's snug, and the arms are a bit baggy, so it looks a little bit strange, but it doesn't look that odd. I think I've got a picture, so if I've got a picture I'll insert it. You can see that actually, yes, it's noticeable, but it wasn't worth at that point frogging back 3 inches, 5 days of work, you know, on both sleeves and on the body. And then counted my stitches. And I realised that by joining things where I did, I actually added 10 stitches to one sleeve, and 5 stitches to one sleeve, and 15 stitches to the front, in a completely off axis distribution that meant that I had baggy sleeves and wonky sleeves and a torso that was too tight. And at that point I thought, it was 10 o'clock at night, and I was crushed, and I didn't want to have to frog it back, but I just knew that if I left it till morning, that it'd be worse in the morning. And so I sat up for 3 hours frogging back all of that, moving markers as well, so like trying to make sure that I put my I've got these safety pin style crochet hook markers that I've been using as well. I had to put those in to mark where the original knitting markers would go, and then I had to check my maths again once I got back to the safety line. So this is a tip: if you're doing colour work, add a safety line. So I added that safety line after I finished the colour work, and then did 2 normal knit rows. I added that in, and I was originally going to have to pull all the way back to there, but I actually spent the extra time adding a second safety line in, and that is just one row below where I split for the sleeves, so that I didn't have to do another 2 or 3 hours of work to make up those rows that I had previously done before I did the underarm. So I had to add a safety line, frog everything back, redo my maths. This is now, you know, approaching 1 o'clock in the morning, and then I still made another mistake and I had to recalculate it again in the morning, but that was fine because I told myself that once I'd frogged everything back and I got to a point where I could pick it back up again in the morning and start again, and that I would check my maths in the morning, and it was a good job I did because I got it wrong again. It is now correct. I have checked and triple checked and quadruple checked, and I must have done it about 10 times. It has just been constantly like adding up my stitches to work out, have I done it right? And the reason for my mistake is, like I said, I went around following the markers and not following the symmetry of the pattern at that point. It was a really stupid mistake. I know why we did it. We'd gone into town that day, and so we were waiting for a bus. The bus didn't come. We went to a coffee shop, and I was rushing to try and get it cast on so that I could knit the straight rows in the bus. And then I never did because I didn't actually get it all cast on. So all I did was rush it, and I just failed to do my maths correctly, and I didn't check. I don't know why I didn't check. So that has been a whole saga. Totally whole saga. But it has been a really good learning curve, because once I have this, if I can fit any motif into the triangle that exists for the pattern I'm currently working on, so if I swap out the moon for something else, then I now have all of the maths involved in working out how to make this jumper with what needle sizes, with DK weight yarn, what stitches I need to add where, what I need to bear in mind about the central or the symmetry of the motifs. And also I've done a few little bits of just normal knitting learning that will carry through to any size yarn that I work with in future. So this time round in the pattern, I'm really happy with these short rows. So I have done a jumper before with an Aran weight yarn, and the pattern for that jumper was really strange with its short row techniques, and instead of going to the furthest point first and then turning and then coming back on yourself too much, it seemed to overlap in places, and it ended up becoming a very square short rows, and it didn't look good at all. I mean, like, it's wearable, like when I'm wearing my hair down, it hides behind my hair, but it's not the right shape for my neck. And I then redid that on a different jumper, redid this on this jumper, except instead of following the pattern for the Aran yarn, I had a new pattern for short row shaping, and that pattern, that's why I put this safety line in, because I wanted to check that this yoke would look nice. So I put the safety line in, and then I did an inch or so on this and tried it on to see if that neckline sat in a really nice way, and it does. So I now have a wrap and turn technique, or dimensions for a wrap and turn short row shaped neck that I know looks really nice and isn't super obvious, so I can take that into any knitting project going forward. And also the colourwork itself. So the colourwork, I don't know if you can tell, but the grey, moon and stars is forward. It pops, it jumps out at you. That wasn't what happened the first time I knit it. I did about an inch or so of the colourwork using the grey yarn, carrying the grey yarn over the top of my background yarn, thinking that it being on the top would be what pushes it forward, and actually it's the opposite effect. So I ended up instead having to carry my floats so that the dominant yarn colour, so the grey, so that it pops and pushes forward, is actually under the background colour, and the background colour is what pushes it forwards then by being on top of it. So that was a learning, and the reason that I spotted that this was wrong was very obvious with such small colourwork pieces. So for the moons, I totally wouldn't have even noticed. But as I was doing these single stitches for the stars, when I was using the grey incorrectly and it was non-dominant, any time that I remotely pulled on the background colour, trying to sort of even out the stitches, even out my gauge, it would actually recede, and to the point where you wouldn't see it. It's that stark a contrast when you've got one stitch trying to stand out by itself. So my recommendation would be that if you're ever doing a colourwork pattern where you have stitches of a contrast colour that are on their own, then make sure that that is the dominant colour and you carry it in colourwork the way that you carry a dominant colour, and that is underneath your background colour on the floats on the back. So floats on the back, I've really been trying to keep these nice and tidy. So they maybe don't look that tidy on the back, but one thing that I was being really conscious about was carrying my floats on a different stitch every time I went round, so spreading out where they were, because if I carried the float between the same two stitches, you can kind of see it there actually, where I've done it out of necessity, it can kind of become a little bit visible if you stretch the work out. So we had just finished talking about things I learned about colourwork. Another thing that I learnt, I noticed in a previous jumper that I made and remembered for this jumper that I needed to edit, and unfortunately had to frog back, was how to pick up stitches on the underarm. So when you do an underarm, typically you will have to make some stitches, cast on some stitches in order to go to bridge under the underarm. No different with this one. This one expected me to put 12 on, so I put 12 on. And one thing that it told me, and is my new favourite underarm cast on method, is to use the backwards loop cast on method to cast on underarm stitches instead. And the reason why I like this is it's so simple. It's a bit fiddly to do your first row into, but it gives you a practically seamless join. So the backwards loop, let me see if I can get some yarn and make this visible, because I'm holding this up so this will be a bit weird. But say you have got, I've finished faffing with my yarn. Say you have got your yarn at the back because you've been doing a knit stitch, and you've got your needle. What you would do is you would fold a loop so that the yarn is caught on this side, and then put that loop on. So as you pull down, it's going to create a loop, it's going to lock in place there, and it's not a very stable loop, so I don't think you would generally want to cast on with that method. But for the underarm, what you have is a cast on stitches that have barely any thickness to them, because then you've got the loop that goes around the needle, which is a stitch, and then at the bottom you've got one thread of yarn just carrying along. Now, because this is all sort of dependent on the one thread, you want to make sure that you're not casting on too tightly, and then also when you do get around to it, inevitably it will have tightened up, and so you are going to have to kind of pull it apart a little bit first to get your needles in to work those stitches in your first row. But it is from that point onwards, there's basically no thickness to your cast on, which I think makes a really, really nice underarm join, because the last thing you want is for something to be like riding into your underarms because there's so much thickness where it was seamed. And what I can't show you because I had to rip it back was that I then went and picked up stitches along that cast on in order to do the sleeve. So I've got the torso being worked at the moment, and I picked up stitches to do the sleeve. And when I last picked up stitches on an underarm, I lined up those stitches so carefully with the ones that I cast on, and I didn't account for the direction of the stitches. So when you are working a yoke down jumper, for example, then you can see it with these, your V-stitches are pointing down. The peak of your V's are pointing up towards the yoke. So that happens in the torso. When you carry on down the torso, the V-stitches are pointing downwards. And this happens on the sleeves too, on this part of the sleeve. So on the side of the sleeve that is facing outwards, then your V-stitches are pointing up. And as you work the side that is inside, the stitches are going to be pointing up. But as you unfold it, the stitches are going to change direction. So if I unfold it, those V's are along the sleeve. If I lift my arm up, then my V stitches are pointing up and then my torso stitches are pointing down. And that's the problem that you get along the seam of your underarm, is that if you pick up stitches exactly aligned to each other, then the stitches that you previously worked from your cast on going downwards are going to have the V's pointing down, and they're going to meet a V pointing upwards where you pick up stitches in order to do the next ones, and you're going to have out of lined stitches like that. So my advice is, and it did really work really well until I had to frock it back, is that actually pick up your stitches between your pick up your sleeve stitches between your previous arm stitches. So when you've got two V's that are downwards like that, this one is going to create an illusion of a V stitch pointing the other way. And so if you pick up a stitch here offset instead, then it looks like you're carrying on a row, and it's practically seamless, especially with such a dark yarn like this. Maybe if you had a fainter yarn, like a cream or a beige, maybe it would be a little bit more noticeable that there's something going on there. But it's just those little things that I'm finding every now and then that I just feel are really perfecting my perfecting my knitting technique. That was a lot of T's and that did not come out right. So yeah, I really enjoyed that, and like I say, the only problem with that is that I then had to rip it back. So when I pick them up again to continue the sleeves, which is what I'm going to be doing next, I think, I'm gonna continue doing that, and I'm gonna try and remember anytime that I make a jumper in future that that's how I need to pick my stitches up. So that was a lot to discuss, all about one jumper, but some of it I hope that you found useful because it's applicable to jumpers in general. Other stuff I tried to discuss it more about method and how I've been trying to make it to fit me in particular, and hopefully those are also applicable for you if you need to make adjustments to your jumpers. I genuinely am so happy about how this jumper is going. So considering that this time yesterday I had this giddy look on my face as I photographed me wearing the jumper, thinking that I had mastered my sleeve decreases and all was going well, and it was a little bit poofy but I could deal with it. I went from that ecstatic joy to soul crushing that I had to rip back 10 hours of work, and I really want to try and get this done at least before Christmas, but I kind of wanted to get it done earlier in December so that I could then do some Christmassy knitting during December, and I'm worrying I'm not going to have time. But I absolutely had to pull it back. When I sat there last night, the reason it was so soul crushing is because I just knew if it was that my sleeves were a bit big and my torso was a bit small, I could have lived with it, and I was doing. That's why I kept going for as long as I did. But when I realised that actually my sleeves were different sizes to each other, I couldn't handle that. And knowing that the mistake was because I've also potentially offset the pattern by not thinking properly about what I was doing, I had to pull it all back. And the only thing that kept me going in that, because like I say, it's soul crushing, and if you've had to rip something back like that, you'll know. The only thing I can say to you is that when I tried it on this morning, even though I don't have the sleeves to the length that I had them before, and I don't have the torso to the length that I had it before, even now it fits so much better. So much better. I've got a little bit more room in the bust, which I was meant to have the whole time because that's why I increased stitches in the first place. And my sleeves still give me plenty of space, but it's now a reasonable amount of ease. It's not too baggy because I'd mismatched it. And I now know that my maths was spot on, that I'd calculated figures for myself and for my body that mean that I can pick up another pack of 4 coloured yarn and make myself another jumper and just tweak the pattern in future. Like this is an investment in myself and my future knitting of jumpers to have worked this out, because I'm going to wear acrylic yarn. Like, I know some people won't. I find it quite warm, and yes, okay, wool is warm and wool is breathable and acrylic isn't breathable, but like realistically this jumper has cost me about £5 to make, well, £5 in raw materials to make, and a nice hand-dyed woolly one is gonna cost me upwards of 80 quid to make. So I need something to wear around the house and not wear if I snag it on a door handle. So I'm gonna be making more jumpers in DK acrylic yarn, and I'm so happy to have learned how to grade my own jumpers, to learn techniques that make my jumpers look like even more perfect, and to have learned a very valuable lesson about the symmetry of your collar work motifs, that I don't think I'll make that mistake again. I think of those 10 hours, and those 10 hours, if it's just about making the jumper, it's soul crushing. But none of us went to school and learned something for our degrees in 10 hours. That's like 1 day, 2 days worth of work in total. When you frame it like that, when you frame it as like long-term education, that's 2 days of experience in knitting for me that will allow me to make a lifetime of jumpers. And that's more valuable. Like, I'm pretty sure that there's some inspirational quote out there somewhere about how we learn more when we make mistakes, because we remember the mistakes, than if we just kept getting it right all the time. And I'm weirdly joyous about that. I'm over the soul crushing part of it. I'm still a little bit upset because I'm not going to have this done as early in December as I would like. It is already the 29th. Yes, the 29th as I'm recording this, so obviously I've only got 1 more day in November left. I knew I was never going to finish it in November, but I at least hoped that I might finish it in the first week of December and then be able to focus on some Christmas stuff. And that's just not realistically going to happen. I've now got to make up a week's worth of knitting. And so now my more optimistic goal is still 2 weeks into December, and my realistic goal is more like 3. I want to get it done by Christmas. So that's upsetting, because it feels like I've wasted time when I think about that, when I think about just getting the jumper done. But actually this jumper is going, like, and it does fit me so much better now, incredibly so much better, and I just can't tell you how valuable that is to me. And I really hope that you have this experience of mastering your measurements for knitting for yourself, because when you get that fit, and that fit is just what you want it to be, it's a really, really great feeling. And I feel like I've just said that in 6 different ways, so I'm gonna shut up now. But it has been a roller coaster, and actually for the last 2 or 3 years, I think my goal at the start of the year, not my New Year's resolution, but like my yearly goal has been do a jumper, get around to doing a jumper, learn how to do a colourwork jumper. And for various life reasons that hasn't happened. And so now I'm at this point where I've made it. Like, I just turned around and I thought, I'm going to knit every day in November, so that at the end of November I should be able to have like a big project done, like to try and get something done and off the needles before Christmas takes over, because Christmas is always so busy. Not that my last few months haven't been, but Christmas is worse. So I wanted to get a big project done by the end of the year, and that's worked. That's been great motivation. A little bit stressful at times, especially when I had to rip stuff back. But I'm going to have this jumper, and it's going to look great. So I'm really happy. Yeah, I managed to talk for like 45 minutes about a jumper project, for a single jumper project. So I'm going to stop now. But hopefully I'll be able to bring you some Christmas content over the next few weeks. It is my intention, because I've got a few really cute little Christmassy ornament designs that they're not my own, but I'm going to make them and link you to the patterns so you can make them yourselves, just because they'll be cute little projects I can do really easily. I've probably got a few more baby items that I need to make for one more person that I know who's expecting, and then I am free to make whatever I want to make. I really wanted to make like a Christmas nativity scene, because I've had a Christmas nativity crochet book for 2-3 years, maybe longer, and it's the sort of thing where like you really could just do like a figure every other day and have a whole set by the end of it, and I've just not been able to pull that book out and do it because everybody keeps getting pregnant for the end of the year. Just like this time next year, I swear, if there are loads of people who are pregnant again, I'm gonna be so annoyed. So I've got a bit of baby knitting to still finish off for people. I don't know if I'll get that nativity set done. I might just get little Christmas ornaments done instead, but they were cute Christmassy ornaments, so I'll still aim to get them done, and then I want to get this jumper finished. So that's my goal. I also still need to actually record the hand-dyed yarn makes for you, because I've got 3 things so far that I've made with hand-dyed yarn, and I really want to show you them and talk about them because they were such an amazing experience to knit with hand-dyed yarn. But that, if I start talking about that now, that's going to be a whole nother 40 minutes. And so I've really got to stop this video. Yeah, it's all happening. So I know that I've not been present in vlog form for a little while, but I have been busy knitting in the background. I do have lots to show you as long as I get time to sit down and record it. Most of my knitting these days seems to be like meeting knitting, or like I'm at a social gathering and it's inappropriate for me to stick a video on and knit, but I can knit while I talk, so as long as it's a small project I can do that. But it does mean that I can't sit and make a video until now. So I also, like I say, haven't sat down to edit my Scotland footage, so I've got that to bring you too. So 1 or more of these videos will appear by the end of the year. That's what I'm committing to. At least 1 video, hopefully some more. I can't promise to do Vlogmas. I do not have an interesting life. I know a lot of people who do Vlogmas and they all have knitting or content creation as their full-time jobs. So realistically, since that is not my full-time job, I just can't do Vlogmas. I might be able to do a video every week where I have some Christmassy content, but I'm not going to be able to do Vlogmas. So please don't expect that from this channel, but please do expect videos, because I am going to put out some videos over the course of the next few weeks. Let me know in the description what you're making. Let me know if you have issues with grading jumpers as well, because I can't be the only one. I'm sure I'm not the only one. I've seen enough people on the internet complaining about having to make alterations that I'm pretty certain I'm not the only one. But I might be the only one with the arm issue. So like, let me know if you have the arm issue, because that seems like a bit more niche. But yeah, and if you want to chat in the comments more about what corrections I made to do that, like what calculations I did to work that out, then we can chat in the comments below. Just let me know if that is something you want to talk about. Yeah, I am going to wrap this video up, get it edited and send it out to you, and next time we chat it's going to be December. Merry Christmas, everyone!